So before we go on to exactly how to start and stop MHT, a few basic things we'll talk about. We all know that the pendulum of menopausal hormone therapy has been swinging to and fro, but now we are clearer that the benefits and risks depend on the age and time since menopause. And hormone therapy should not be in isolation, but part of an overall strategy for the care of the individual woman. So these three indications are very clear, and not only are there as the three main indications in our clinical practice guidelines of the Indian Menopause Society, but also in consensus statements and guidelines all over. Vasomotor symptoms are the primary indication, and then genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or what used to be called vulvovaginal atrophy, and this, of course, can be tackled by local estrogens. And then osteoporosis, which 10 years ago, there was some doubt on whether it should be started or not. But we now know that estrogens are really the best treatment in terms of improving bone density as well as reducing fracture risk for women. So it should be the first line treatment for prevention and treatment of osteoporosis in women. The important thing is that besides these three indications, though these are the indications per se, there are lots of other benefits that one accrues from getting a woman when a woman is on hormone therapy. And this is an improve in sleep, a huge improvement in joint and muscle pains. Mood disorders are also improved, as well as sexual dysfunction. And all this leads to a big improvement in the quality of life. Besides this, there is a definite decrease in the colon cancer risk and the decrease in diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And now, with if it's given early, we seem to get a possible benefit both in cardiovascular disease as well as perhaps in cognition. So, what are the contraindications? We must know the contraindications because obviously we should not start MHT in women who have breast cancer, any undiagnosed vaginal bleeding, thromboembolism, coronary artery disease. So, it is not for primary or secondary prevention. If there is active liver disease or pregnancy. I'm going to talk in reverse and talk about the major adverse effects first because we need to rule out all these problems before we actually start the hormone therapy. So besides the small things like nausea, vomiting, breast pain or mastalgia or heaviness in the breast, the major problems are venous thromboembolism, stroke, coronary artery disease, and breast cancer. As far as VT is concerned, it does increase with oral hormone therapy, but there has been no increase seen when you are using transdermal MHT. So in women who are at risk of VTE, you could consider using transdermal if they have an indication. The absolute risk is rare in women below the age of 60. And of course, MHT is contraindicated when they have a history of DVT, particularly if it's an unprovoked DVT. In obese women, because they are at higher risk of VTE, you should think of transdermal estrogen therapy. But screening for thrombophilia is not indicated prior to starting MHT. There is an increase in stroke risk. This is a very definite increase of 8 to 12 per 10,000 per year, so not a very high risk. And this is because hormone therapy induces pro-inflammatory factors, but the rates are strongly age-related, and there's no increase in the risk in the 50 to 59-year age group. And this was even seen in the WHI study. Unfortunately, the mortality due to stroke is greater in females, and that is why we need to be more cautious. And it is important to address hypertension, smoking, and diabetes and see that these are controlled before we put them on MHT if we are planning to do it. And safety data from studies of low dose and ultra dose, low dose, and non oral regimen are encouraging. So in women who are at increased stroke risk, you need to consider using ultra low dose therapy. In women who are less than 60 and recently menopausal and who have no previous coronary vascular disease, the estrogen therapy reduces cardiac disease as well as mortality. And there is a consistent reduction in mortality in hormone therapy users in the recent meta-analyses that have been done, as well as the 13-year WHI data in the younger age group. Now, what about breast cancer? Now, this is a recent joint position statement which was given in 2020 by the British Menopause Society, International Menopause Society, European Menopause and Andropause Society, RCOG, as well as the Australasian Menopause Society. They have broken this up and shown very clearly that in the age group between 50 to 69 years, if women had used MHT for 5 years from 50 years onwards, then if they used continuous combined MHT, there was an increase of 1 case per 50. If it was 10 years, then it was 2 cases per 50. And similarly for sequential MHT as well as estrogen alone therapy, but the numbers of course keep decreasing. So 4 to 5 in 70 and 13 to 14 out of 200 when they are using only estrogen therapy. So remember that it appears to be now that it is the progesterogenic component rather than the estrogenic component that is increasing the breast cancer risk. So we need to think more in terms of what progesterone we're using and for how long. So they have said that the CA breast is dose and duration dependent, and there is no effect of estrogen dosage, and continuous combined hormone therapy is the risk is greater than with sequential because you're using the progesterogenic component for a shorter duration. With vaginal estrogen therapy, there is no increased risk, so it can be used safely in women who require it. And the risks are lower with micronized progesterone and dydrogesterone. So we need to consider using these molecules instead of the traditional MPA and norethisterone that used to be used earlier as part of the progesterogenic therapy for to cover the endometrium when we use estrogens. Now, when to start? Before we say how to start, we need to say when to start. So as I've been talking, there needs to be a valid indication. We need to see that there are no contraindications, and the woman should be below the age of 60 or within 10 years of her final menstrual period. So in women who are beyond 60 or after 10 years, there are some women in this age group who will need some form of treatment. But if they do, then we need to consider non-hormonal alternatives. Now, how did this timing hypothesis come? It was basically initially from observational data and epidemiological data. And then after the WHI, many organizations started interventional trials to actually address just this, the timing hypothesis. So the Danish trial was actually for osteoporosis prevention in 1,000 recently menopausal women between 45 to 58 years. And they had the usual estradiol with norethisterone acetate. But though they were looking at osteoporosis prevention, they also looked at the cardiovascular risk. And they found that in these recently menopausal women, there was a significant reduction in myocardial infarction, heart failure, as well as mortality. And then recently the KEEPS data has come out, which looked at women within 3 years of menopause, and they were put into 3 groups on conjugated equine estrogen with progesterone, transdermal estrogen 50 micrograms, again with progesterone, and placebo. And they found that there were minimal rates of progression in the intima wall thickness, decreased of symptoms, improved bone health, and sexual function. And there was no significant difference in adverse effects in all these 3 groups. So using progesterone instead of using an androgenic progesterone seems to decrease their cardiovascular risk. And here, ELITE addressed again the timing hypothesis and had two groups of women, one who were below 6 years from menopause and average age of 55 years, and then those who were more than 10 years with a mean age of 65 years. And here they used estradiol 1 milligram and progestogen gel 45 milligrams versus placebo. And they looked at carotid intima thickness after 6 years. And they found that in the younger women who were earlier since in terms of time since menopause, there was significantly less progression in the CIMT scores on the women who were on MHT as compared to placebo. Whereas in the late group, there was no difference in progression. And this difference was significant. So this shows that in women where we start MHT early, they do benefit in terms of their cardiovascular risk. So before we start, just like with any other medication that we start, we need to take a detailed history to see whether they have indications and, more importantly, whether they have any contraindications or any risk factors. This is what will tell us whether we should start the hormone therapy and aid us in counseling of which type of molecule to give and which route we should use. A thorough examination is also important because if they have a high blood pressure, for example, we should lower the blood pressure before starting it. If they're already diabetic, we should address their sugars. If they have other problems, like for example, any gallbladder disease, then that should be addressed. So all these things will only come if we have taken a detailed history and done an examination. There are no investigations which are absolutely mandatory, but it is a good idea to use this opportunity to screen them for every disease, because many of these women would not have come to us after their childbearing years. So it's a good idea, if possible, to do these investigations. But in women who are very symptomatic, we can actually do the investigations and side by side start them on therapy. Pap smears again are not essential, but it's a time to use as an opportunistic screening. Ultrasound abdomen and pelvis will help us because if there are gallbladder stones or acute gallbladder disease or liver disease, then we can think in terms of avoiding the first pass effect in the liver and using transdermal preparations. Mammography is important because this will then tell us if there is a lesion already existing, in which case we can treat her and talk to her about things. And also, hormone therapy increases breast density. And as we all know, increased breast density itself is a risk factor for CA breast. So if she has increased breast density, then we can do a sonomammography or an ultrasound, and also then think about whether we need to give her tibolone instead of conventional hormone therapy if she is at least 1 year postmenopausal. So all these things will help us in choosing what molecule to give her if she decides to take hormone therapy. The choice of the drug and the regime depends on several factors, as I've elucidated, depending on her history and examination findings, as well as investigations, and also on the patient characteristics. So what exactly are her symptoms and what is her BMI, and counseling about what she would prefer to take. Some women would always like to take an oral drug. Some women are open to other routes of therapy. So whether she's perimenopausal or postmenopausal, because if she's perimenopausal, and remember that many women have significant vasomotor symptoms in the perimenopausal years, then these women need to be given sequential therapy so that they get their regular menstrual bleeds, because otherwise they tend to get breakthrough bleeding. If a woman is at least 1 year postmenopausal, then it is okay to give her the continuous regime if that is what she wants. If she still wants to get periods, then we can give her sequential, because as we know, when we give her fewer days of progestogen, it does protect her endometrium, but at the same time makes her less prone to breast cancer. If she has any comorbidities, then again we have to decide what route to give her. And like I said, her preference. And there are some cities in our country, and some molecules are not available yet in India. And some cities we are not able to get, or some of the smaller towns, we are not able to get the transdermal preparations very easily. Now, the safest way to start is with the lowest effective dose. So in the past, we used to deal with giving them high dose initially so that their symptoms reduce. And then after 3 months or so, we used to reduce the dose. But now we know that low doses are also very effective. So you should counsel the patients well and start with a lower dose. Tell them that they're unlikely to see the effects for at least 3 months, full effects. And so they should, persist. They cannot, it's not like an antibiotic that they take it for a week and they'll feel better. So we need to talk to them that it will be at least a month before they have some effects, and perhaps 3 months before they get the full effect. And so we should not jump to increase the dose within a couple of weeks of starting the regime. Now, all the data have come from these two major trials, the HOPE trial initially, and then which had the traditional CEA and MPA, which showed us with very, very low doses of estrogens as well as progestogens, we get the same effects. And then the Replenish trial data, which came out very recently, which had estradiol with progesterone. And the progesterone also were at very, very low doses. And here we found that in both these trials, there was continued efficacy with fewer side effects. And because the side effects were less, there was improved compliance. And there was efficacy not just in the vasomotor symptoms, but the prevention of osteoporosis was also not compromised. And this in the Replenish trial was shown very elegantly, irrespective of age or the BMI. So even in women with a high BMI, a very low dose of estradiol as well as progesterone was giving them equal relief, which was very good because we tend to feel that if the BMI is high, then these low doses won't be enough. So the common route that we use estrogen is oral. And so the low doses are conjugated equine estrogen of 0.3 milligrams or estradiol of 1 milligram, which are very easily available with us. Now, as far as the transdermal routes are concerned, the patches came, but they went because they are no longer available because of problems, because they used to fall off much earlier. So they were not, could not be used for 3 days as they were meant to be. But now we have transdermal gels available, which the common preparation has got 1.25 grams of the gel, in which there's 75 micrograms of estradiol in it. And the vaginal route, when we have genitourinary syndrome of menopause, we need to use only vaginal. And there you have estriol. We have the conjugated equine estrogen, both available as creams, and the estradiol tablet, which is also available. As far as progestogen is concerned, now, as I've been telling you, more and more data coming in that the risk of breast cancer is due to the progestogenic component. But in women with an intact uterus, we need to use it. We also, because this is what protects their endometrium, and this is something which we should stress to women, so that if we are not giving them a combined, because combination pills are also available with estradiol as well as dydrogesterone. But if we are not using a combined pill, then during the progestogenic component, they realize that they're getting more of the mastalgia as well as the nausea, and sometimes they stop taking it. So we need to tell them that they require it to protect their endometrium. And in women with severe endometriosis, particularly deep rectal endometriosis, even if we have done a hysterectomy and a bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, we should consider using progestogen, because there may be these implants, the endometriotic implants may flare up with just unopposed estrogen therapy. So if you're using progesterone, if you're giving it orally, then daily, if you're using as a continuous combined, then 200 milligrams. And if you're using it for 12 days a month, then 300. And vaginally, the doses are lower. If you're giving dydrogesterone, then at least 10 milligrams when we are using for 12 days a month, and 5 milligrams if we are giving daily. The LNG IUS system is really very useful, because then you need not worry at all about their endometrial safety. So if a woman is accepting an LNG IUS system, then it's very easy. You put in the LNG IUS as the progesterogenic component, and then you can give her the estrogen as an oral tablet. So she just needs to take 1 tablet a day. And if you need to give her transdermal, of course, she can use the gel every day. And what is important is that we do not need progesterone when we are using vaginal estrogen therapy. So if we are using only vaginal estrogen therapy for genitourinary syndrome of menopause, then there is no need to cover with progesterone. It is very safe, and safety data are available for 12 months of continuous use. So you need not cover with progesterone. However, in women in whom we are using systemic estrogen for vasomotor symptoms or any other problems, then if sometimes they do not have enough effect on the vaginal symptoms, in which case you may need to add vaginal estrogen. And in these cases, of course, they need the progesterogenic component to cover the systemic estrogen that you're giving them. Just a word about Tibolone for women with dense breasts, or if they have particularly symptoms of mood and libido, if they've had adverse effects with conventional hormone therapy, if they're at least 1 year after the menopause, or they've already had conventional hormone therapy for 3 to 4 years, or if they have family history of breast cancer or history of endometriosis, then it is you could consider using Tibolone. And this is available in a 2.5 milligram oral tablet, but 1.25 milligrams is equally effective, again, on symptoms as well as bone health. So you could ask them to take half a tablet every day. As far as follow up on these women, you should call them after 1 month, mainly to see if they have any side effects, to reassure them and to check whether they're getting some amount of efficacy. At the end of 3 months, you review them to ensure that they are happy with the drug and the regime, and they're taking it as you have advised them, and that they've attained efficacy. Because if they haven't, this is the time where you might have to increase the dose of estrogen. And annually, you should review them to check whether they still require the drug, to examine them again, because things might have changed in this year in terms of their medical issues. And if required, any particular investigations which need to be repeated can then be repeated. Now, when to stop? There is no mandatory time to stop. Essentially, we stop when symptoms subside. So typically it takes 2 to 5 years. So I think in most cases, you would need to uh, think about it about 2 to 3 years after you start the medication. And there is no set time limit for all of them. So you cannot say that, okay, in 6 months we'll stop it. Always in women who have concerns, you can see them every 6 months and check that everything's okay and reassure them. And if they're happy, continue for the next 6 months. Those who are happy, annual examinations are enough. Of course, if they develop a serious adverse event, or they have intolerable side effects, we will need to stop the hormone therapy. For premature ovarian insufficiency, we should continue this till the natural age of menopause. And one more thing is that in these women, you give them standard dose. You don't give them low dose therapy. Until the natural age of menopause, you give them standard dose therapy. So if you were giving them conjugated equine estrogens, you would give them 0.625. If you were giving them estradiol, you would give them 2 milligrams. And in fact, in the very young women, you can even give them combined oral contraceptive pills, because they may be more inclined to take something which other women of their age are taking, rather than their hormone therapy which their mothers are taking. So you could keep them on a combined oral contraceptive pill at least till the age of 40. and then consider either changing them to a low dose contraceptive pill or to MHT. Now, how to stop? The data is, mixed on this, in the sense that uh, either tapering or stopping abruptly both have the same effects. But usually, clinically, we tend to taper because women are able to tolerate it better. And usually, if you stop it abruptly, it's like when you have iatrogenic menopause. So their symptoms come back quite a lot. So this is anecdotal. Data does not support this at all. It does not say that you should taper. It basically says that you can do it either way. For women who have serious adverse effects, of course, you have to stop abruptly. Similarly, if they have to undergo surgery, you may have to stop abruptly. But otherwise, you could taper it. So you could ask them to take half a dose and then take it on alternate days and then slowly stop it. But we need to counsel them about this and tell them to come back if they are having serious adverse effects. So you can consider restarting or simultaneously starting something non-hormonal so that the transition is easier. And stress the need for annual assessment. Even if they have stopped taking their hormone therapy, we should see them annually, not only to help them with any symptoms that come, but to ensure that otherwise their metabolic health and their other health, their other cancer screening, all that continues. Because they might have done this for 10 years, and now at the age of 60, they think they don't need it. Whereas after 60, there are other problems which can appear, and we need to continue to see them so that they can be screened for everything. So the joint statement, which I alluded to later, it says that there should be no arbitrary limits on dose or duration, and this should be individualized. There are overall benefits to giving hormone therapy to those who need them, not only for symptom relief, but a great improved quality of life, as well as cardiovascular and bone protection in the early years since menopause. And there is definitely a decreased all-cause mortality in women who have used MHT for at least 5 years. The IMS clinical practice guidelines on menopause were revised in 2020, and they continue to say that hormone therapy is the most effective for vasomotor symptoms, and we should give the lowest effective dose, but for the duration that is required. This is what has changed from earlier, where they used to say for the shortest duration. Now we say for the duration that is required. The safety largely depends on the woman's age and her time since menopause. So the years since menopause are also important. Vaginal estrogen is the most effective for urogenital atrophy, and hormone therapy, this should be used for prevention and treatment of osteoporosis, but this should be initiated within 10 years of menopause. And hormone therapy in regular doses should be offered to women with premature ovarian insufficiency till the natural age of menopause. So, to conclude, our aim should be to help patients make informed choices. We need to keep abreast of the data, but also evaluate the quality of data so that accordingly we can individualize the treatment, and we should give the women a full range of effective choices and offer them both the behavioral as well as the pharmacological approach. Thank you very much.